Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. The presentation that we have today, it will be about the food pantry and resource closet. Not the one here, but the one in her country. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Guyana.
Guyana. Yes. So Dr. Amala Luncheon will be giving a presentation on that, and later on this week, if we reach our goal and still without it, we will be raising money for our food pantry and resource closet, and some Kappa Sig members will be getting soaked with water by the students and faculty if they choose to participate. So thank you so much for coming out.
All right. Thank you, Janaya. Anything to help with pantry and food resources. So I titled this because we're looking at food resources. I was happy to have the title that I chose. So I'm going to give you some stories from the only country in the world that produces all the food it needs. All right. So that's Guyana. I am from Guyana. And that is why I am qualified to talk about that. All right. So happy Easter if you're celebrating. Adam, what happened? Adam? It went away. No. See, this is not playing right. Yeah, I don't know. I think it restarted. It did not. I can see it here. There you go. It's ready to connect, but it's not connecting. Extend, duplicate. Whoops. This is Adam's computer, guys. Uh-oh. It's not on here, though. What's up there, though? Confirm and continue, maybe? You go to your PowerPoint, hit escape, and I hit the little screen again. Sign in for Google. Okay, maybe we just go to the PowerPoint. Okay. Maybe PowerPoint here. Oh, no.
I think it's because on extend.
Because of what, sorry? It's on extend?
I think it's on extend.
Well, let's just put it on duplicate. And then... maybe it'll go. All right, so we'll try to resume from here. So happy Easter if you're celebrating. This is actually what's happening in Guyana today. So because of where Guyana is located, and we get a lot of trade winds, kite flying is a big deal. So Easter Monday is a holiday, as was Good Friday. And so the entire Easter weekend is really about kite flying. All right, so Guyana is actually located here, the northern tip of South America, small little country in brown here. And it is 83,000 square miles, about the size of Idaho. Population 800,000, and it's the only English-speaking country in South America. Gained independence from Britain in May of 1966, and then became a republic in February of 1970. So the difference between independence and being a republic, if you are independent and you got independence from Spain or England or whomever, and you still have connections to that crown, you would have a governor general. So when you remove the governor general and all the vestiges of colonialism, then you become a republic and you sort of manage your own affairs, right? So Guyana is actually a land of 6 peoples. So East Indians, Africans, Chinese, Portuguese, Europeans, and Amerindians. So the Amerindians are our native people, and there's several tribes of Amerindians. So we have the Arawaks, Waiwai, Makushi, Patamonia, Waro, Akawayo, Arikuna, Wapishiana, and Caribs. Most people know about the Caribs and the Arawaks. Caribs and Arawaks are all up and down the Caribbean, right? This map shows you where the native people live. So it's kind of small, but there's a little color for each of, the region. So you realize that they are actually spread all throughout the country. Most of the people who live in Guyana actually live on the coast here. So most people live around Georgetown. I was born in Georgetown. Right?
So the majority of the gray areas are what you call undeveloped, like forests?
Yes. So if I go back to the first map, the Amazon forest is in South America. So a lot of what the forest, and a part of the forest was actually saved for climate change. And so we pay into some fund where we have promised not to develop this region. And that actually helps to compensate for countries that are producing more than their fair share of carbon into the atmosphere. Symbols of nationhood. So your symbols of nationhood are things like the flag, your pledge, coat of arms, etc. My favorite one from Guyana is actually the coat of arms. This is the coat of arms. It was adopted in February 1966, and it features a central shield flanked by 2 jaguars holding a pickaxe, sugarcane, and rice, symbolizing mining, sugar and rice industries. The shield is adorned with the Victoria Regia lily, which is the flower on top here. Then there are 3 blue lines representing Guyana's rivers, and a kanji pheasant, the bird at the bottom here. And it's topped by a cacique crown. So the cacique crown here actually comes from the native people. So like the tribal chief will be the cacique. The helmet above the shield, so here, and you might remember this from this yellow and red part. You might remember this from when the Pope died, and you had all the ceremonial things. Many people had those types of crowns. So the helmet represents Guyana's history as a monarchical state, again, coming from Britain. The scroll at the bottom is the national motto. So 1 people, 1 nation, 1 destiny. There are 6 peoples, and so it kind of ties us together. Right? All right, so Guyana is a mining country. There are a lot of natural resources, and I've listed 34 of the 35 here. Gold is the major one. So we have gold, diamonds, and these little black and yellow things here are places where mining takes place. So essentially all across the country, right? And it is managed by the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission. Coming to the food part, which is why we're here, in the 1970s, when I was just a baby, and no, there were no dinosaurs then, there was a major initiative by our founding leader. So Forbes Burnham actually is who took Guyana to independence. He was a lawyer, and he was a part of the People's National Congress. That was the party that he had. And so there was a major initiative to feed, clothe, and house the nation. And his main thing was about making Guyana food self-sufficient. And in terms of clothing, he was encouraging people to do local garment production. And as you could imagine, just coming into independence and having been handed a lot of things by your colonial owners, there's a lot that you didn't know to do for yourselves. So now you had to form all these industries, and you realize, oh, but we do have a lot of things. How do we do these things for ourselves? In terms of housing, it was aimed to improve local housing materials. So things like clay bricks. So like the bricks, like when the president talks about picking the right color brick for the building, I'm like, I know how this goes. Because we used to make clay bricks in Guyana, we still do. And then national service is what provided the skill. So national service is sort of like paramilitary, and people would go to national service after high school. You do a year of national service. You would live in a specific area, and you had to do this paramilitary service. So you learn to do things like agriculture and not farming, agriculture, clothing. You'd learn food and nutrition, etc. But this was after high school, right? So I lived through what's called the Burnham era. And I told some of my friends that I was going to do this. They're like, oh, you can talk about the Burnham era? Yes, because I lived through it. So he had these social-oriented policies. So the intention was, like I said, to get self-sufficiency in a lot of things. So in that movement that started in the 1970s, he nationalized key industries: sugar, rice, bauxite, all of those things. And we had a grow what we eat what we grow kind of thing. Under that, wheat flour was banned in 1982. So you think of wheat flour being banned, and wheat flour is how you make bread, how you make biscuits, all the things that you'd make, or crackers, as you call them. And so then we had to learn to make food and flour from other things. So you had to make flour from rice, because rice was abundant. We trade rice with everybody else in the world, right? So you had to make flour from rice, from cassava, from a lot of things. And it was a tough time because nobody taught you to do this. You grew up knowing wheat flour, and you think of how easy it is to make bread. And like in the pandemic, everybody was learning to make sourdough bread. He didn't have that, and wheat flour is easy to work with, right? Also, during that time, electricity was unstable, and we had what was called load shedding. So load shedding is you have a certain amount of electricity, and to make it work for everybody, you'd have, like in the newspapers, you would have a load shedding guide. And so you know when you would have electricity and when you wouldn't have electricity. And I became very familiar with that as a student because you got to get your homework done. So, you don't get a chance to write to your professor to say, well, where I am now, the Wi-Fi is out and there's no electricity. Can I have an extension? Nope. You either study by candlelight or lamp or kerosene lamp or whatever it is, or you check to see when you'd have electricity and you get your work done then. And bear in mind, there was enough electricity to supply the whole country, but just, for whatever reason, it was very unstable. And so in his mind, working through nationalizing these things would give us really a sense of pride. And so you had more jobs for locals. You had it at the same time, you had brain drain where educated people were leaving because people figured, well, there must be an easier way to do this. But it also enforced a sense of national pride. It gave us self-reliance because now you're learning, well, if I got to stay, how am I going to survive? What are some things I can do? And cottage industry really blossomed during that time. And of course, we had free education from nursery to university. So it wasn't all bad. Yes, it was tough, but it wasn't all bad. Right? The main thing I remember in terms of when Forbes Burnham died in 1985. So pages to form these pictures, right? So this giant thing that looks like a picture, there's students on it there. So this is, you did it in form 2, so your second form in high school. So you're 11 or 12 years old, right? And you got to spend a year doing this. And then on the tarmac, you'd have different dancers or whatever part you were playing in this. So I could only find a couple of pictures because people didn't really like mass games. It wasn't like a lot of fun, but they would feed you because you're taking students away from their normal school, and all schools had to do this. It wasn't like if you went to like an elite school and you were exempt. No, the only reason I didn't do it was because I was asthmatic. This is another year. So this one, it says basic needs fulfilled. Again, there are students on there turning those pages, and then students on the tarmac doing something else. This one talks about civil disobedience, etc. So these are different years or different times, because again, there's not a lot of pictures on it. So the themes that I could find that mass games had in 1986 was Standing Up for Guyana. In 1987, Oh Beautiful Guyana. And the first one actually happened on February 23rd of 1980. So the first mass games, that's when it commenced, and the performance was very Korean inspired. In fact, there were South Koreans who had come to train us to do this. So it began with a reenactment of the proclamation of the Cooperative Republic 10 years earlier. And it went on to performances of industry and agriculture, education, defense, and then the National Feed, Clothe, and House program was introduced. So what does Guyana grow? So Guyana grows rice, sugarcane, fruits and vegetables, including things like plantains, cassava, sweet potatoes, coconuts, citrus, papayas, pineapples, mangoes, peppers, celery, and then other crops like coffee and cocoa and peanuts, spices, etc. In 2024, the food exports in Guyana totaled 79.6 million US dollars, right? So we do export quite a bit. Guyana is able to produce quite a lot. And I just put a little market scene there so we have an idea. Then we get into the National School Feeding Program, which actually started in 2010. And the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Local Government combined, and they target all nursery schools, so that would be kindergarten, and then all primary schools, so that would be elementary schools, grades 1 and 2, and they would give them biscuits and juice that are locally made. Biscuits are cookies, right? So you'd get biscuits and juices that were locally made. And right now it's being reviewed to include a meal. So like a solid meal as opposed to just a snack kind of thing. Food. Only one country in the world produces all the food it needs. And here's why: 100% self-sufficient. This tiny nation produces everything in its own land. Guyana is the only country that can fully feed itself. Studies fine. So how was Guyana able to do this? So climate alone does not explain it. Just because you're in South America and you have favorable weather all the time doesn't mean that you can feed yourself. If you don't know what to plant, there may be an issue. So Guyana does what's called intercrop agriculture. And I did hear Evelyn Ledbetter talk about this when she spoke about chilies and planting here. So how intercrop agriculture works is that you would grow 2 or more crops on the same field, using the resources at different times. So you plant different things and they pull naturally from the soil at different times. And that is central to farming success. So coconut farmers would also plant pineapples or tomatoes, depending on what they need. Corn and soya would use the same soil, and that would fix the nitrogen naturally. So you're not having to go back and leave it for 6 months so that it regenerates. You'd plant 2 different things and so that it regenerates naturally. A lot of that has to do with careful planning. So you couldn't just, figure out, well, today I feel like tomatoes is the thing, you flip a coin. No, there's some planning involved. Biodiversity is essential, and it gives insurance over monoculture. So because you have the ability to plant more than one thing, doing it like that prevents you from just planting only rice or only sugarcane, etc. Right? So Guyana works with nature. And you realize now that diversity can outweigh efficiency. So if you plant 2 things or 3 things at a time, you will be able to get more out of your crop and out of the time that you have to plant than just the one thing. So what did Guyana do? It had to invest in the fundamentals. So things like irrigation, drainage, processing facilities, infrastructure, and more than anything else, farmer education. It's not sexy to be a farmer. Like, nobody wants their child to be a farmer. But then when you start to think about the fact that at some point we have to understand where our food comes from, then it might be important. So there is, again, a School of Education, GSA, and students actually go there for 4. There must be a question. Yes, Dami.
Do you feel, I know you said it was not just the climate, but do you feel other countries can adopt the same methods you have and then develop themselves?
I didn't touch anything, Adam. Yes, I do, because there's a science to it. So I think intercrop agriculture is probably underutilized just because people don't know that you can do that, right? So people often think, well, no, I'm a sugarcane farmer, and all you do is plant sugarcane. But what happens after cane? You need to burn the field, you need to have it regenerate, all the things, right? So you were leaving it barren for 3 months to 6 months. You could have planted something else that would have been the same regeneration for you. You know what I mean? So yeah, so yes, it could be. It could be done in other places.
You think not planting wheat helps that?
We didn't plant wheat at all.
That's what I'm saying. Do you think that helps? That they're planting so many other things that it helps the diversity of all of stuff?
I am not familiar with what like temperature wheat needs to grow. Like I don't know if wheat grows like only in temperate places. I have no idea. So, but wheat is not original to the Caribbean. Is not. So, you know, I don't know. So is it, do you know that if you plant wheat, you can't plant anything else?
A lot of things are subsidized here. So it forces farmers to only plant corn or soybean or wheat.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we have so much of the same food in our country.
Mm-hmm.
So when wheat was outlawed, it was to keep it from being imported, not planted.
To keep it from being imported, yes, yes. So it's wheat flour that was banned, yeah. And so you had to, I remember, so one of the things that I actually remember is when my mom was traveling, so she used to mark CXE. So CXE is the Caribbean Examinations Council. That's an exam that you do in Form 5, so the end of high school now to go to university. And you would travel to different Caribbean countries based on your subject matter. So she marked English, and English was actually marked in Barbados, Jamaica, or Trinidad. And in your passport, they would write, you had allowances on foreign exchange. So if you could, whatever the amount was would be written in the back of your passport after you'd gone to the bank. So there are several controls with really trying to, with this nationalism thing, yeah. And mommy would bring back things like smoked herring, because you were allotted, when you're coming back in, there was a limit to foreign things that you could bring, right? So you could only bring back whatever small amount of, you know, whatever it is, smoked herring, coffee, things that, you know, seem basic now, but I guess he was really pushing an agenda to eat what you grow and grow what you eat. So, yes, Dami.
Does Guyana also export oil? I know you all found oil recently, but you know, my country, you know, like we have a lot of oil, but we don't know utilize it. We don't know various the process that goes deep into it and how to make this a successful venture.
Mm-hmm.
So, was there something specific Guyana did?
ExxonMobil is in there, which is probably not the best deal for us, but it is where we are. So in terms of the infrastructure, I felt that we should have learned from Trinidad. Trinidad is right next door. Well, not next door, but up. Trinidad has had oil for just over 100 years. So they know that process. When Trinidad had oil and we were looking at Caribbean integration and stuff, Trinidad always, one thing that one of their leaders had said is, we have oil and oil don't spoil. But, you know, they've come to the end of that cycle really. And now, you know, Trinidad is not where it used to be. But a lot of Trinidadians have found themselves in Guyana to help in the oil industry because they know the infrastructure, right? I think having ExxonMobil there is good, but I don't think that we've negotiated the best deal that we could have. You know, I don't think we come out winning, even if we've got 2.6 billion in profit. What was the actual number? Because apparently there was over $185 billion that was not given to Guyana. You know, so, and I don't know that it costs that much to run ExxonMobil. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Are there any foods that can't go next to each other because it'll like kill whatever else is around it?
I don't know that, not because I'm not a student of agriculture, but I don't know like off the top of my head, like which two things you wouldn't put together. I don't know. But I think there's enough land to be able to grow things maybe in different places if the climate would facilitate it. You don't have to grow them together. I think one of the places where we're still lacking is food processing facilities because there's still so much waste. So being able to move something from like pineapple when there is a glut to like pineapple jam is still small and it could be much bigger. So you'd make like pineapple juice, the pineapple rings that you would do with pepper, you would do pineapple chutneys, all the things, and then there's still waste. So you have to move into things like canning and, many other things. There's a lot of room for that because we have a lot of fruits. So. But people are not hungry. I guess that's a good enough thing. There's also not really trade route between Guyana and many of the other Caribbean territories. So many Caribbean territories have really high import bills. And that is an issue because now tell us what's the mechanism for raising funds to soak a Capasig member? Because I could think of somebody in Capasig I would so if I could pay it with, I might.
There will be 10 of them.
Oh no. It just went away. Continue without Google data. Screen mirroring.
Are we taking this to the other room?
It's not like you can do it over there.